All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining Reform Nigeria Television. My name is Idris. I'm reaching you from the city of Ibadan. We have a very interesting program for us this Saturday evening. We're titled "The Israeli-Iranian War." It's no longer news for us. But to introduce this today, I would like to read something that I have written down here. Islam is an extremely difficult subject to talk about in our world today because many of one or more connections with the religion. I, for example, have a Muslim father. My great-grandfather brought Islam to Elisha from Ilorin in the 19th century. They called him Ajagbe Kefiri, which means roughly the man who condemns anonymity. My father tells me that he suspects that my penchant for both religious and political reforms might have come from that side of our gene pool. But beyond my personal life, Islam is also strongly connected to our national life as a nation. Nigeria has approximately a population size that is 50% Muslim. Since 2009, our nation has battled the insurgency called Boko Haram, and our security forces have been unable to subdue this evil that threatens the very existence of our country. As Nigeria grapples with the reality of Islam, the war toe-to-toe with militant Islam. If the United States of America thought she was immune to Islamic insurgency because of the large swath of Atlantic Ocean that divides the American continent from Europe and the Middle East, she was surprised on the 11th of September 2001 when two planes into the Twin Towers in New York. At the close of the day, no less than 3,000 Americans were killed in that attack. America has since declared war on militant Islam, which led to the killing of Osama bin Laden in 2011. Exactly 10 years after the September 11 attack. On the 7th of October 2023, Israel experienced her own September 11. That tiny Middle Eastern nation woke up to a terrorist attack from Hamas, where some 1,300 Jews were killed. Israel has since declared war on terrorism with her neighbors. In one fell sweep, Israel destroyed all the leaders of Hezbollah in an attack that remains unprecedented till date. They have decimated the ranks and files of Hamas, and they continue to hunt for men in that terrorist group as long as Israel hostages are held in Gaza. A little over a week ago, Israel, through its special international agency called the Mossad, invaded Iran, decimated many of her missile attacking equipment, military men, and even unalived their top scientists. Israel has since precipitated a war between the two nations because they insist that Iran exports terror to their land, and they are developing nuclear weapons also. As bad as militant Islam is, not all Muslims are militant. Some are peaceful and open to dialogue. One of such Muslims is our guest tonight. His name is Idris Ahmed. Idris will be joining us on RNTV tonight to discuss with me and Dr. Adetola on the subject of the Israeli-Iranian war. We hope to help our viewers to situate things in the Middle East in the context of happenings in Nigeria, and we hope that you'll be blessed as you watch our broadcast tonight. My name is Idris. This is Reform Nigeria Television. I'll be your anchor for tonight's broadcast. So I want to thank our brother who is, for some reason, let me just quickly get him back. So I think he's here. Even he's also here. So just give me a minute to get the two gentlemen on the program. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining. I also want to thank every person who is joining us. We have quite a number of people joining this broadcast tonight. And it's obvious because that a lot of people are interested in the subject of the Israeli-Iranian war. I'm really trusting the Lord that this discussion will help every one of us to be better enlightened about the situation in our world today. So just give me 1 minute to bring this gentleman back on live. I'm having serious problem with my laptop. It keeps giving me trouble. The laptop itself needs to be unalived. Maybe alive and unalived again. So we have Dr. Adetola here. Dr. Adetola, thank you very much for joining. And Idris, thank you also for joining. Let me just introduce first our guest. Dr. Adetola is one of us. He's part of RNTV, so he's going to be introduced last. But I'm going to introduce Idris Ahmed. Idris, thank you very much for joining. I'll give you a chance to speak for now, but I mean very soon. But I need to say that Idris is a software developer. He's based in Abuja. We sent an invitation to him on short notice, and he agreed to join our discussion. Thank you very much, Idris, for being with us. Can you say a word to our viewers?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on this program, and I hope we'll have an enlightening discussion. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. MJ Adetola is not a guest. He is part of us on RNTV, but on very short notice, I asked him to be here, and he's here again. He's a medical doctor, based in Canada. He's been one of our biggest supporters, and he's going to be speaking also from the Christian point of view. Dr. Adetola, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me back. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, yes, I've introduced Dr. Adetola. If you will invite you to please leave comments on any of the social media platform where you're reaching us from. We're broadcasting on YouTube, on Facebook, and on X. So anywhere you're reaching us from, please just leave a comment. We'll try as much as possible to display those comments. The way the discussion is going to go today is that I have a slide or PowerPoint slides of about 8 to 9 pages. And we're going to take each of those pages one after the other, just so we can appreciate it. It's going to be, in a sense, the broadcast is going to be, a criticism of Islam. But I actually asked Idris to be here so that we don't, there's something Yoruba say. They say you don't scrape somebody's head behind his back. Oh, ni faori olori lenye. You know, so we want our Muslim brothers to listen to us live and be able to respond live. You know, and I reached out to Abu Abdain. I said, if he could be part of us, he was part of us in the past, in a broadcast in the past, but he says he's not very conversant with the subject, and he suggested Idris, and Idris is here with us. So I want to say thank you very much, Idris, for being with us. We're going to take each of those slides one after the other, but before we do that, I think the very first thing I want to look at is concerning our sponsors. So Reform Nigeria Television actually has to broadcast with a lot of money. We need a lot of things. We still need a lot of things, you know, but the little things that we're able to do today is as a result of the sponsorship of some Christian brothers who run a business in Lagos. So the business they run is in somewhere called the Ibeshe Housing Estate in Ikorodu, Lagos. Okay, they have this short-let facility at that place, and it's a 3-bedroom facility. I was there last year, June, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. You know, so I want to encourage us to please patronize these people. They are being our sponsors. We have an advert that I usually play just before the program starts. It runs for about 50 seconds. So I want to ask for us to please stay tuned and watch the advert, see the facility, and please patronize them. When you patronize them, we will be able to do a lot more. We'll be able to reach a lot more people with what we're doing. Lakim Investment will be on in a minute. So that is Lakim Investments. They have that shortlet facility at Ikorodu, Lagos. If you are in Ikorodu, Lagos, you need a place to stay. You need a place to stay very briefly. Please patronize them. It's a facility also you can use in case you are doing business on the island. You know, you can actually stay there and then use a boat or fly over over the lagoon and do your business and be back in Ikorodu. So we're going to just go very quickly to the next slide. That slide, I think, has to do with the map of Israel. So we're going to start this discussion by looking at Israel. I mean, the whole conflict between Israel and Iran, there's no need to introduce it anymore. Everybody is aware of it, you know. But when I developed this slides, I sent copies to Idris and Dr. Adetola. And Dr. Adetola suggested that we should start with the map, or we should include the map of Israel in the whole discussion. So that is what I want to start with. All right. So perhaps I should even ask Dr. Adetola to help us appreciate this map. So Dr. Adetola, can you help us with that? So this is a map of the Middle East.
Yes, I asked that people look at this, that we include this map, just to appreciate the geography. If you see there's that little tiny, I'm deliberately using the cursor here. Can you see Iran? Iran is there, you can see the borders. I'm using the cursor to map it out. You can see the Caspian Sea up there. And just south of it is Kuwait, Qatar, United Arab Emirates. To the west of it is Iraq. Then there is Syria, there is Jordan. And then there's that little tiny area there with the black star is Israel. And then, of course, to the north, there is the sea again. There's Lebanon, immediately to the north of it. And then there is Egypt there. Saudi Arabia is a little bit to the south. But the point I'm trying to make there is, if you look everywhere, there's Turkey there, there is Azerbaijan, Turkey up there. But the whole point is this: Afghanistan, Pakistan. If you look everywhere, it's surrounded by Islamic countries. Iran itself is not really an Arab country, it's Persia. Cyrus in the Bible, King Artaxerxes. For those of us who are Christians, when you read the Bible, when you come across those names in the Old Testament, King Darius, King Cyrus, King Artaxerxes, those kings reigned in the place we now know today as Iran. That's it in color. Can you see? It's all, but today, all of those countries are Islam. I think I'll stop there.
Yes.
It's so difficult to see what Israel looks like. See all those big countries, and that's Israel. Very tiny dots there. Surrounded everywhere by all these countries that are now Islam. They were not like that back 2,000 years ago in the time of Jesus Christ. In fact, Islam, the prophet of Islam was not born until about 570. That's 6 centuries after the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Let me stop there.
Yes. Yes. So I also try to bring up this particular map, because if you look at this map, it's a sense that you can't even find Israel. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a pointer here, but Israel is somewhere to the west of Syria, right, Dr. Adetola? Yeah. Am I correct?
Yeah. So
I think
that's Jordan. If you look at Jordan, the best way to identify Israel is once you see Jordan, just look a little bit west there. That's
okay. So somewhere. Jordan is below.
Yeah,
below
Israel essentially
somewhere below Syria there.
Yeah. So once you see Lebanon, you see Syria, then you know Israel is somewhere in that neighborhood. It's very tiny.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And by the way, I should also say that even though all of the neighbors of Israel here are Muslim countries, they are all not anti-Israel. I do not know whether Dr. Adetola is familiar with the politics. I didn't join the study of this politics until October 7th. So maybe I'll ask Idris eventually. But Dr. Adetola, do you know anything about the politics? Because I think that there's a sense that Saudi Arabia is at peace with Israel now. Egypt is at peace with Israel.
Yeah.
Which other country is there? Quite a number of their neighbors.
No, that's evolved. It wasn't always like that.
Okay.
Immediately after the Declaration of Independence in 1948, there was the Arab nations were against, but over time, interestingly, Iran was actually pro-Israel until the Islamic Revolution in 1979. So Iran actually was about the only, and maybe Lebanon were about the only friends that Israel had. But in time, Lebanon became more Islamic, and then Iran after 1979, revolution, when the Shia Islamic people took over, now slowly became, and not slowly, almost immediately became anti-Israel. But before then, when the monarchy was in power, they were actually pro-Israel.
Okay. So I'm going to go to Idris now. And the point I want to raise with Idris is this. I suspect while this program is going to be kind of critical of Islam and some of the content of their scriptures, I suspect that the crisis going on in the Middle East right now is political, not so much religious. Idris, do you want to say something about that? Do you agree with me or disagree?
Yes. Yes, I agree with you. First and foremost, we give praises to Allah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We give blessings to his prophets and those that follow him. So it's interesting that bringing up this map, because the interesting part is these are borders that were drawn by the colonial masters, if you know, French and Great Britain and a few other countries, and they divided up these lands across them geographic borders just on the map, and they drew the borders. We all know the history. The same thing happened in Africa, so probably it wouldn't be this. And then after the Second World War, Palestine, it was called the British Mandate of Palestine. It was divided for the British, so they divided up the entire region, and then the British had control of Palestine. So previously, it was mostly under the Ottoman Empire. Another that is interesting to mention is the Islamic communities we are like really homogeneous in the sense that you used to have a mix of Muslims, Christians, and Jews that live relatively peacefully amongst each other historically. And another thing is the Islamic civilization is a testament to the preservation of the Jewish communities. This is also well recorded in history. So especially when during the Spanish Inquisition, some other times that Jews were pushed out of Europe, they usually flee under the Muslim Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and also under Al-Andalus. If you know one of the greatest Jewish theologians, Moses Maimonides, he was in Al-Andalus. He spoke Arabic. His books are in Arabic. The greatest Jewish theologian. So Jews actually flourished under the Muslim Empire. So even that Jewish mandate of Palestine, there's a population of Jews, Muslims, Christians. We have churches in Palestine, historical churches that sadly they've been destroyed today because of the war. So it was under the British mandate of Palestine, and then the Britons put the issue of Palestine during the period of self-determination, independence. They pushed the issue of Palestine to the United Nations. Then it was newly formed after the World War II, and then they gave, I think, about 60%, there about 57% to the Jews, and the remaining land to the Arabs, despite the Arabs being majority of the population. Okay. So, firstly, in terms of like the legality, I don't think the United Nations has the right to drop lands. Even the colonial masters drop lands of people across borders. But this itself laid the foundation of what we have today, because the Jews in Europe, they had Holocaust. They were killed in many numbers, and they were expelled from Europe. Europe didn't want the Jewish population. So they came into Palestine. Initially, some reports said they were welcomed. Some of the Palestinian families, we have like direct reports for some of the families that they welcomed them. They allowed them to be in their homes. Then they were kicked out. Then there were a lot of raids across Muslim villages. The sad massacre of Deir Yassin, which still plagues the memory of Palestinians still today. More than 100 people were killed. Babies were baked in the oven. Pregnant women were caught up, and terrible, terrible things. And then that led to the War of Independence of Israel, because a lot of these, more than 300,000 Palestinians, they were indigenous to the land, had to flee to neighboring Arab countries. There was pressure on their government, and then we had the first Israel-Arab War, which Israel has also called the War of Independence. And then late around October, there was massive atrocities against the Palestinians, and then a lot of them were expelled. So before then, more than 300,000 had been expelled, put pressure on the Arab communities to wage war, and then there was war. They're obviously going to lose, because Israel, as small as Israel is, it has always had the support of the superpowers, and the Arabs, they have the support of any superpower. So by like if you look at the numbers and the geopolitics and everything, they're bound to lose. So towards October, there was a lot of atrocities and a lot of killings, and then from 300,000 it went to as much as I think about 800,000 Palestinians that had to leave their homes and then flee to neighboring places. Among them was Gaza. If you don't know, Gaza was a refugee camp for Palestinians. They were pushed out from their homes in what is now called modern day Israel, and most of the population in Gaza are refugees or children of refugees. So it's important to understand the dynamics of all this, and then that lays the foundation and lets you understand the geopolitics of that region. Just not to.
I'm probably.
Audience, I think
the crisis.
I'll yield the mic.
Yes, I understand. I'm probably the crisis that led to October 7. Dr. Adetola, do you disagree with Idris and any of the points he raised there? I'm not very versed with the history, I must confess.
In broad strokes, I would say yes. There will be some things I will, but not to detract from. What I don't want to do is take us back
what we're saying
of the historicity of the mandate prior to 1948, what happened in 1948, and what led us to October 7. I'm sure we can always come and litigate some of that. Idris looks like someone who is very versed in history, and I'm sure we can have another session, right?
Yeah,
we can.
But just one thing to note: in 1948, the United Nations. Sorry, in 1947, November 1947, the United Nations actually offered two states. Two states. Israel warmly wanted to become one. The Palestinians said no. They were not going to accept the Israel becoming one. So they rejected statehood. Israel welcomed it. And since then, multiple attempts have been offered. Sorry, multiple offers have been made, which were rejected. But again, and then the second thing was, yes, back in 70 AD, the Romans did expel Jews and they were dispersed. But that doesn't mean that every single Jew was expelled. There were still specks here and there of Jews in the land coexisting peacefully with Arabs. Okay? And the state of Jordan was actually created at the beginning of the last century. Jordan never really existed until last century. And if you really look, these people who are Palestinians today form the majority of the people who are now citizens of the state of Jordan. So I just wanted to let that be known. Now, what led us to October 7? Because I said October 7. October 7 is only going to constitute part of what we're saying. I think Iran is mainly our topic today. All right. Otherwise, we're going to be all over the map.
Yes, we will. We'll very likely not finish. So please, let's just try to stay within the context of our slides. Mm-hmm. Now, I wanted to just give an update with regards to where the war is presently. The present situation was, there's a sense that my argument in this discussion, in today's presentation, will be that the crisis between Israel and Iran started some 1400 years ago. But the immediate thing that precipitated it all, I want to argue, is October 7. Okay. And from October 7, we have had a situation where Israel has been put on overdrive, if I may put it that way. They have annihilated the masterminds of the terrorist attack on Israel on October 7th. I can't remember their names, the men, their names now, but they've killed quite a number of them. The sad part, the bad part of the crisis in Gaza and other places where Israel is carrying out operations to root out Hamas terrorists is that there is a humanitarian crisis there where children are being killed, women are also being killed, and all of those. But I am a Nigerian Civil War historian. And one of the things that was the biggest headache for Nigeria during the Civil War was that the Western media, that's England, US, all of them, Europe, everywhere, were crying against the hundreds and thousands of Biafran children that were dying on the streets of Biafra. And that was the major talking point against the Nigerian forces. In fact, it was one of the things that led the Nigerian government at that time to expedite actions to bring the war to a quick end. Okay, because usually when war starts like that, people begin to now complain, our children are dying. When they almost forget that when war is declared on a place, everybody is affected, including women and children. You know, so that is it. But I mean, that's the down part of the Israel's activities in Hamas, in Gaza and other places. Israel carried out operations against Hezbollah. That one is unprecedented in that all the leaders of Hezbollah were taken out, all of them killed. They use the word taken out now just to mollify the situation, but all of them were killed. Okay, the people who succeeded them were also killed, so that Hezbollah, presently a terrorist organization, is non-functional. Non-functional. There's one that operates in, I think, in Syria or Lebanon. I don't know where exactly. They call them the Hutus or Houthis.
No, that's Yemen.
They also have been dealt with.
Yemen.
Yes. There's a situation in Syria that led to the overthrow of Bashar Assad. It was also as a result of Israel's activity there, although I'm not sure where Israel stood. But presently, East Syria is being run by, I think, ISIS or something like that. Okay. And then last week Thursday, Israel moved into Iran, and they set, in fact, they were already on ground. The Mossad were already on ground. They set in operation. They took out all their missile shooting, many of their missile shooting equipment. And then the equipment that offers them dome, that offers them the Iron Dome, they took out many of them. As they were doing that, they were also taking out military men, taking out scientists, and so on. It's unprecedented. And you will appreciate it more when you realize that the people doing all of these things are one tiny nation in the Middle East. Presently, the life of the Ayatollah is in the hand of Israel. No longer in the hand of God, but in the hand of Israel. Let me use that with euphemism. In the hand of Israel. And the only reason why the Ayatollah has not been killed is because they do not want to turn that region into a Gaddafi situation or a Saddam Hussein. Because the Ayatollah offers leadership to Iran, and they don't want a situation where without its leadership, that country will be divided and thrown into civil war because of succession issues. And presently, Israel has complete control of Iranian skies. Complete. This is the real victory. They have complete control of Iranian skies. Iran is the largest. They have the largest geography in the Middle East. And Israel has complete control. Do you know what that means? It means they can't fly anywhere. You can't go anywhere. Just yesterday, one of their leaders, one of the Iranian soldiers, commanders, I don't know what, he was going in, the drone followed him, destroyed him and his car. And one of the points I'm going to raise out of this thing, Dr. Adetola, is that, look, all our children that are going to school, this is education. This is, let me get Dr. Adetola's comments, and then I suspect that Idris would agree with me on so many points, but thankfully this is my show. So, Adetola, what do you think?
So, yeah, actually, this whole thing predates October 7, the Iran thing. I mean, it's one of the things that some of the commentators here in the US have been saying, that Netanyahu has been saying this for more than a decade, that, yeah, Iran is 2 weeks to getting the nuclear bomb. Iran is 3 weeks to get in, and true. Israel has been saying this. And it's just that what we saw in the last 1 week is an escalation, because Israel has been undermining the Iranian attempt at getting the nuclear, pegging back Iranian attempts at getting their nuclear program going. Because, you see, back in 2015, you see, actually the Iranian nuclear program started a very long time ago. In fact, it was the US back in 1967 that supplied the 5 megawatts nuclear reactor to them. But it was supposed to be for civilian purpose, to generate power and all that. And then, unfortunately, the guy who helped the Pakistani government, A.Q. Khan, that's his name, he stole all the secrets from Germany to make a nuclear weapon, and he sold it to Iran for $3 million back in the 80s. So he sold it to Iran, and then that was when Iran started. And then, fast forward, 2015, Iran signed with the 5 permanent members of the United Nations that it will open up, because in between, there have been a lot of sanctions slammed on Iran because everybody knew they were getting ambition. Initially, it was actually Iranians who reported them that, look, they've already built two stations where they were trying to develop the nuclear weaponry. And then later on, it came out that they had built the Fordo, the one that Netanyahu is begging Trump to give him the bomb, the big bomb, to blow up Fordo. But later on, even though they signed, they now built the third one. So back in 2015, Iran eventually signed this agreement that it will now open up its space to nuclear inspectors and all of that. And then they agreed to free up about $150 billion in assets that had been frozen. But basically what happens is Iran signed the agreement, but it wasn't really following up. In fact, it was discovered that more than 3,000 centrifuges, were found. And when you have that much of centrifuge, it just means you are not trying to use it for civil purposes. You're only trying to do it for to develop a nuclear weaponry. Now, the question is, how come they've been talking about this for more than 20 years and Iran has not yet developed nuclear weapons? It's because Israel has been killing their top scientists for a long time. It's not now. It didn't start last week. They've been doing it for a long time. They've been feeding their nuclear reactor with viruses, their computers. They've been doing it for more than 10 years. Israel has been doing that. In fact, some of the drones that were launched at Iran in the last 1 week were actually launched from inside Iran by Mossad. That's how confident Israel has been. And some of the ballistic missiles that were launched by Iran at Israel, the reason they were not successful is because many Islamic nations like Jordan, like Azerbaijan, like Saudi Arabia, Syria, helped to actually bat them down because they are cooperating with Israel to make sure that those things, the damage to Israel is actually limited. I mean, Israel is actually supplying water to Jordan. So people forget some of this thing. There is a lot of cooperation. Iran itself makes life very, very difficult to many of the Sunni. A lot of people don't know that there's also these differences in the Islamic theological
Sunni
beliefs.
Shiites divide.
Iran is the largest Shia nation. It makes a lot of all the other Sunni. And then Iran also sponsors terrorism. Shia terrorists kill more Muslims than it does people of other faiths. And I'm sure my brother Idris will agree with me. Let me cede the microphone to allow him speak.
All right, Idris, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the first thing I would like to address is the two-state solution. It was brother, sorry, is it Akintola, right? Yeah,
Adetola.
you mentioned that
Dr. Adetola.
Dr. Adetola. Okay, so you mentioned that there's after the UN partition of Palestine, the Jews accepted and the Palestinians rejected, which can be understood, because if someone tells you now that there was an archaeological excavation in Abuja, I don't know which state you are from, in Lagos, and then you're able to figure out that there was a Jewish civilization that lived, let's say, 2,000 years ago. Now you have to leave nobody is going to accept that. So it doesn't work anyway. But what I want you to know is currently there's a two-state solution, Resolution 242 by the United Nations, that tells Israel to withdraw to its 1967 borders, which means Israel gets up to 80% of the land, Palestinians only get 20%. Up till today, Israel has refused to abide by that UN Security Council resolution. Resolution 334. Israel, please go back to your 1967 borders. Stop occupying Palestine land. Israel has refused. Resolution 246. Please go back. 446, sorry. Please go back. 465. Stop building settlements. Stop expanding settlements in the West Bank. It's illegal under international laws. They have refused. So, and interestingly, interestingly, Iran has always voted in favor of the two-state solution. All the Arab League nations, there was Arab Peace Initiative of 2002 in favor of the two-state solution. Almost every single year on the United Nations floor, there's a vote in favor of two-state solutions. Almost every country, more than 185 countries in the world, always vote in favor. Few countries, with the exception of US and Israel, always vote against it. When it comes up in the UN Security Council, the US always vetoes it. So it's quite clear who doesn't want the two-state solution. In fact, Hamas, in their recent update of their Hamas is a law or something, they said they are willing to abide by the 1967 borders. So it's quite clear, even in the Hamas, is it their constitution? I'm going to say, even Hamas accepts it, Israel doesn't. So to October 7th, right? As the doctor has mentioned, there are events that happened prior to October 7th. What we need to understand is, was October 7th happening? Because as I explained to you, Gaza is a refugee camp. Almost all the population in Gaza are either refugees or children of refugees. None of the people in Gaza born since 2007 are seen anywhere outside of Gaza, according to United Nations, according to B'Tselem, Amnesty International. B'Tselem is a Jewish human rights organization, by the way. They describe Gaza as an open-air prison. In fact, the biggest open-air prison in the world. Professor Ilan Papi, a Jewish Israeli professor, describes the blockade that Israel has placed in Gaza prior to October 7th as an incremental genocide, because Israel placed Gaza under a total land and sea and air blockade. They barely allowing any food except above the minimum, just to prevent starvation. The United Nations has reported prior to October 7th that Gaza required more than 500 trucks a day. Israel only used to allow 100 to 200 trucks a day. The Goldstone report called the blockade in Gaza a crime against humanity. So if you understand this context, you understand, and the reason why Hamas carried out the attack was with the intention to break down the blockade, bring up the Palestinian issue, because some of the Arab nations were doing normalization relations with Israel, to bring up the Palestinian issue back to the world stage, and also to free up some of the hostages that had been taken by Israel. Prior to October 7, Israel had more than 5,000 hostages in Gaza, and then post October 7, they now have close to 10,000 hostages in Gaza. So another thing I'm going to mention.
Dr. Adetola.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not
go ahead.
done.
Just go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sure I'm not done
Quickly.
because we have not even gotten
Quickly.
to the Iran attack. Okay. Under the Geneva Convention, it's allowed to carry out military resistance against an occupying force. The killing of civilians on October 7th is unequivocally wrong. And also the taking of civilian hostages is also very wrong. While we condemn this, we also have to condemn the conditions that led to October 7th, which is far worse. Professor Segal described it as a genocide in 2021. So another thing that I'm going to talk about is the Iran attack, which is the main discourse here today. So, as I mentioned, there has always been the speculation that Iran was developing nuclear weapons. Iran had a nuclear program after 2003 they no longer saw the interest of pursuing a nuclear weapon, because the reason why they wanted to have that was because the arch enemy, Iraq. If you know about the Iran-Iraq war, for 8 years, almost 1 million Iranians were killed. And they thought getting a nuclear weapon would protect them from Iran. But after the US invaded Iraq in 2002, they saw no need to pursue nuclear weapons. And this has been the position of the intelligence community since 2003, that Iran is not developing nuclear weapons. So, and this is well known. It was Sigabad recently in March 25 says the Ayatollah has not given authorization for Iran to develop nuclear weapons. They are not developing nuclear weapons. Rafael Grossi of International Atomic Agency, Director General of International Atomic Agency, says there's no systematic effort within Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. This was as at last week. So now for Israel to carry out a preemptive attack with the notion that Iran is developing a nuclear weapon or wants to develop a nuclear weapon is under international law an illegal offensive or act of aggression against a sovereign state. Also under the Geneva Convention, it is illegal to carry out attacks on nuclear sites. It's also illegal to kill nuclear scientists. It's not, you don't kill scientists. And Iran, under international law, is allowed to have a
Idris,
nuclear program. There's a lot
Idris, because of our time.
Anyway.
Yes, because of our time. Dr. Adetola, can you respond to some of the things he said? So before you go to your question, please. Before you go to your question. Dr. Adetola, do you have any response to the Gaza situation that he has spoken about?
Sorry, why don't you ask your question so that maybe I can address it at the same time?
Okay.
No, it was going to be for Mr. Deji. Because he said Israel has total control over Iranian skies. I don't know which report is carrying that.
Yes.
Trump tweeted about. I don't know what it's meant by they have total control over Iranian skies. Although you're explaining, but in terms of like what's happening on the ground, I don't think that's factual. That's what I just wanted to say.
What do you think is happening, President?
Okay.
What do you
think is happening, President? We haven't seen Iranian planes going anywhere. They've been restricted to shooting ballistic missiles and not any air sorties.
So when you say you have total control over Iranian skies, means you can fly Israeli jets into Iranian airspace and they won't be shot down. I've not seen like any report corroborating that. So that's what I'm trying to say. But what happened is
that's what it means.
Yes. So before June 30, on the June 30th attack, what they did is they carried out what you call a decapitation attack on Iran, because Iran was negotiating in good faith with the US. Steve Witkoff, the US envoy, had told Iranians that they've authorized Israel not to attack until after the peace talk. They had scheduled a peace talk for Sunday. So they are under the sense of security that we are not going to be attacked.
Idris, they had 60 days to make this negotiation. They blew it off.
You don't give a timeline when you are negotiating for peace.
They have 60 days. 60 days.
No, there's nothing like 60 days. You understand?
All right.
You don't give timeline because it can even go
no.
60 days, right? But you are scheduled the last.
They signed an agreement in 2015 that they were not abiding with. Okay. Obama gave them their 2000. Wait, my friend. Their $150 billion in frozen assets were returned to them. But because they were not abiding, when the Trump first administration came, of course, you know Trump, he decided, look, these guys are not complying. So he withdrew from the agreement. How are they not
complying?
When Biden came, Biden decided to follow what Obama was doing. He became soft on them. By the time Biden came, they were only doing 300,000 barrels of oil per day. Under Biden, their oil production went up from 300,000 barrels of oil per day to 2 million barrels of oil daily. They became rich. What did they do with the oil-rich money? They started funding terrorist organizations, Houthis, Hamas. In fact, somebody could argue that October 7 happened because of all the sudden surge of money that came under Biden. They were poor. They were poor under Trump.
Still stands anyway. How are they not abiding by the JCPOA?
Sorry?
You said they were not abiding by the JCPOA. How were they not abiding?
They were not. The reason they were not abiding, their enrichment got up to 60%. In fact, they themselves acknowledged that. I can show you evidence. They themselves acknowledged that they were now enriching up to 60%. If you are enriching up to 60%, this is not a linear. It's not a linear thing. It's a logarithmic thing. When you start enriching 60% of your uranium, we know you are only doing it not for civil purposes.
But Mr. Deji, I'm not being allowed to talk anyway.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm not being allowed to talk.
I'm sure he'll be done.
I'll stop so you can talk.
Okay, so like the question I asked is, you said they reached up to 60%. When did this happen? Was it during the JCPOA, which was 2015 to 2018, or post JCPOA that they reached?
It was during the JCPOA.
No, okay. So the reports from, I can also show you the graph. The report from IAEA between 2015 and 2016 and 2018, the enrichment rate was below 5%. And during the agreement, during that period, they're supposed to take all the enriched uranium, ship it to France. France turns them to rods and then send it back to them. They use it in their reactors, and they send the plutonium waste to Russia, and then Russia does whatever they will do with it. And during that period, the JCPOA, because it was not only with the US, France, Germany, UK, and Russia, all the members of the Security Council, including China, none of these members said Iran was not abiding. And even after Trump withdrew, they were still abiding by some of the terms. The only thing is they were allowed to not abide by all of certain terms if United States pulls out of the treaty. And the reason why is just to force the United States to come back to the negotiating table. And that's what they were trying to do. Understand? Now, on that thing is, even if I'm going to yield the point that they reached to 60%, this doesn't mean they are making nuclear weapons. And analysts have mentioned that the reason why they enriched to 60% is to force Trump back to the negotiating table. So enrichment to 60% was after Trump pulled out.
So this is what it says. This is what it says. Iran began to violate JCPOA in 2019. It was signed in 2015. And that was during Obama.
2018 was when Trump.
No. Trump was not in power in 2019.
Can you check?
Sorry, was
when Trump pulled out of the deal? Yeah, he was in power.
Oh, so, okay, sorry, okay.
Yeah.
He came in, I think. Yeah, he came in, I think, 20.
But then, when did he pull out?
2018. Check it.
All right. Okay, so Idris, thank you for the point. I want us to move this discussion on to page 6 because we still have 10 slides. On page 6, I want to discuss the issue of, I don't know what I titled it here. My laptop is not.
You said militant Islam.
Militant Islam. Yes. So the first point there is there's such a thing as militant Islam. I am going to start with Idris. Idris, do you agree with our thesis that there is such a thing as militant Islam?
Yeah, not until you define it. I don't think there's any such thing as militant Islam, but I believe that there are fringe groups among Muslims that do carry out terrorist activities, which I am not going to deny that. But if you call that militant Islam, because one way, the problem I have with militant Islam is you are linking their militant activities to Islam. So that's where I have a problem with.
Okay, Dr. Adetola, do you agree with that thesis that there's such a thing as militant Islam? Can you help us with explain that?
Look, Islam by nature is a political movement. Now, my brother may not accept, but it is because there's a reason why the logo or the sign of Islam is not a cross, it's a scimitar. What does a scimitar stand for? Scimitar is a sword, right? It's about conquering. It's about submission, isn't it? It's submission. You have to submit. It's not just pray 5 times. It's also about conquering. You submit, and that is why when Islam gets to a land, even if you refuse to become a Muslim, you still have to submit to Sharia Islamiyah. I'm sure my brother Idris will not disagree with that. And in the ancient times, what you do is, if you refuse to become a Muslim, what you do is you pay jizya, isn't it? So when he says it's not militant, what is that? So if it's not, people say, oh, you do your own, I do my own religion. We know it's not true. When I refuse to do Islam, and Islam is the dominant religion of the place, what I'm supposed to do, if I refuse to do Islam, is I have to pay the protection tax called jizya. So how is that not militant? How do I live under the scimitar, under the sword, and that is not militant? To me, that's militant. When you live in a Christian country, if there is such a thing, I'm not even sure there's a Christian country anyway. Nobody forces you to pay a submission tax to the Christian authority. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not sure of one. Maybe it happened in ancient times, but not in any modern time that I know. So anyway, that's my own understanding of it. But
all right. So right now, before I take a comment from Idris, I think Idris just got logged out. I'll log him in when I'm done with this page. Before I take a comment from him, I actually want to read the writings of the Quran. At this stage, I'm going to give credit to whom credit is due. I don't know much on this subject, so I reached out to Korede Olawunyi. Oyao Ramilowo, help me out with scriptures, and he sent the scriptures. So Quran chapter 9 verse 29 reads, and I quote, "Fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, even if they are the people of the book, until they pay the jizya with submission and feel themselves subdued." So the instruction from Holy Quran is fight those who do not believe not in Allah and his messenger. Quran chapter 4 verse 95 reads, and I quote, "Allah has granted a great hire to those who strive and fight with their goods and persons than those who sit at home." So people who go out to fight, Allah considers those people of a higher standard than those who do nothing. Quran chapter 8 verse 60 reads, and I quote, "Strike terror into the hearts of the enemies of Allah and your enemies and others beside, whom you may not know, but whom Allah doth know." Okay, so from what I can see here very clearly, the Quran itself encourages, sorry, let me get our brother back. The Quran itself encourages Muslims to go out and fight. Say, fight those who do not believe in Allah. It encourages them. If you check the history of Islam, the history of the Muslim religion, after the death of the Prophet, some 100 or 150 years after, the whole of the Middle East, at least some 2/3, if not the whole of the Middle East, had been conquered by the sword. One of the biggest pains that Christians have till tomorrow is that some of the places where the Christian religion had thrived, places like Syria, places like even Iran, Iraq, places like Algeria, Tunisia. When I went to Tunisia,
Carthage, Algeria,
Egypt, all of those nations were Christian nations, but they were conquered. They were not conquered peacefully. They were not conquered by missionary activities. They were conquered by the sword. Okay, the history of Prophet Muhammad himself was a history of fighting. Now, I understand that there are many Muslims who say that Muhammad was going on a self-defense and all of that. But something that's happened to Islam that many Muslims do not know, which has been to our benefit. And what happened to Islam is something called the internet. The internet caused for the Quran to be translated to English, in the sense that many of us who can't read Arabic can now read the original writings in English. Besides that, there are many religious injunctions that Muslims follow that are not in the Quran, but are in the Hadiths. Okay, for example, I understand that the injunction to pray 5 times is actually not in the Quran, it's one of the Hadiths. Okay, and so on. So there are so many of them, and they follow these Hadiths just as closely as they follow the Quran. Christians now have opportunities to study these Hadiths in the original languages. And one of the conclusions that Christians have seen from the writings of the Quran and the Hadiths is this: there are mainly 2 types of Islam today. Okay, there is militant Islam and there's peaceful Islam. Okay, the militant ones are the ones who are trying to follow the writings of the Prophet and the Hadiths and trying to be as faithful to those injunctions as possible. And the peaceful ones are the ones who are trying to reconcile those writings with modern times. And the militant ones actually consider the peaceful ones as Kafiris. They don't regard them as true Muslims. So somebody like my friend here, Idris Ahmed, okay, if he comes across a Boko Haram person, the Boko Haram may slaughter his neck. Why? Because how dare you come to a Christian platform to discuss religion? So that is where we really are. And I think that that is what has dictated so much of the crisis that is going on in the Middle East. It is not that there's one piece or 2-state solution, not one, something like that. It's simply this, that embedded in the Quran and in its history is an aversion for other religion, is intolerance. And I want to even say to Idris, now you may not be aware of this, Christians were like this also. For many centuries, we were intolerant of each other. But we had to learn tolerance after something they called the 30-Year War that ran from 1618 to 1648. Okay, where the whole of Europe was almost annihilated because they were fighting Catholics and Protestants. Okay, and then we've learned tolerance further by the establishment of the United States and so on. But Islam doesn't have that understanding. At least, well, Muslims that are in Nigeria are beginning to learn it because they realize that it's not possible for them to subdue everybody. So they're beginning to learn it. Okay, but I suspect that one of the reasons why Idris is sympathetic to many terrorist organizations, including Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, in this discussion so far, is because deep inside many Muslims' hearts, they have a soft spot for many of these terrorists. And this may be an accusation you could disagree with. It's okay. Okay. But I suspect that if Boko Haram takes over Nigeria today, many Muslims will be celebrating because they will say it is their time. So I want to put forward to Idris that there is such a thing as militant Islam. And militant Islam is very different from peaceful Islam. It's very different from Islam that believes in tolerance, that believes in this kind of discussion. In those days, thank God for Southwest Nigeria that historically we have been very open. You know, I just mentioned in my broadcast today that my father is a Muslim. He probably will be watching this thing. He doesn't watch it now, he'll watch it later. You know, if he sees me, and we'll laugh over it. You understand? But in those days, it is my father, Fure, that will kill me. He will ensure my death. So over to Idris. I believe you may have a response to this.
Okay, so I hope I'll also have enough time to cover because a lot of points have been mentioned. So
it's just that sorry, Idris, you won't have too much time. The reason is because we have about 3 or 4 slides. We will not finish it. I'll give you time.
At least have
okay, I'll give you time, but please, as much as
so that it's fair.
Yeah, just try to get straight to the point. 2 to 3 minutes, please.
Okay, so you would have to be fair in the timing, so that at least we should have equal time. Because otherwise it will look like
Well, we can't have that, because you know what will happen really is that this discussion is not going to end here. You very likely have to do yours on your own platform, but on this platform, it's the time we give to you.
Okay. So firstly,
it's not a debate.
You mentioned,
it's a discussion.
You mentioned like some Muslims are sympathetic towards terrorist group. Boko Haram is too. Okay, so I think that's a very grave allegation. So no, I have not met a Muslim that supports Boko Haram or want any, because Boko Haram, if you look at their killing sprees, majority has been Muslims. If you look at the number of people that have died in the northeast and not parts of northwest and north central, has been majority Muslim. So I think that's a grave allegation. And another thing I just need to point out quickly. Robert Pape, a professor professor at University of Chicago, he wrote in his book "Dying to Win," and he said, after studying virtually all suicide bombing between 1980 to 2003, and he said most of the cases of suicide bombing has no links to religious fundamentalism. It's because the terrorist group are trying to carry out these actions in order to push the invaders or the so-called foreign troops off of their land. And if you look at Osama bin Laden, I put his picture here. If you look at his motivations, it's because U.S. support for Israel, the bombing of Lebanon that killed more than 106 people. That was his recruiting strategy, and also the establishment of U.S. bases in Saudi Arabia. His core motivation has nothing to do with Islam. If you look at militant Islam generally, I believe even Saudi, if you look at Osama bin Laden that you mentioned here, he was trained and recruited by the CIA. He was given weapons by the CIA during the Afghan war. If you look at ISIS also, if you read about operations Timber Sycamore that was authorized by Obama, I think between 2011 to 2013, to take down the Syrian government, it's an open secret. The CIA was funding and financing and training, even equipping terrorist groups, militant groups. If you also look at records, even Netanyahu has even publicly mentioned that they helped finance Hamas. When Hamas was first created, they helped even register Hamas in Israel. They propped up Hamas as an opposition to the Palestinian Authority in order to sow division among the Palestinians, and also to make it difficult to get a two-state solution. Recently, Netanyahu was caught on video saying they are also sponsoring ISIS-linked militants in Gaza. So, and that's why, it's important if you put these things in context to understand militant Islam has no link to actual Islam. In reality, they may quote verse of the Quran. They are taken out of the broader context, and one of it.
So militant Islam is not true Islam.
Yeah, they are a fringe group, very, very small minority, maybe less than 1% of Muslims. It's not possible. What is Muslims globally? They don't share the majority.
What is Quran 9:29?
So this.
What is Quran 9:29?
Yes, if you look at this verse, the historical
and all
context,
this, what are they saying?
If you look at the historical, the first thing is, if you come to the Quran, I think the first thing I'm going to say is, if you look at Surah Al-Baqarah, the Quran says, it sets the groundwork that it can only be a defensive war. Fight those who fight you in the cause of Allah. Only those who fight you, and do not go overboard. Many do not kill children, do not kill women, do not kill elderly, do not kill people in the churches, do not destroy monasteries and churches, do not destroy their vegetation, do not kill animals. You don't even find this in the Bible. If you look at the wars in the Bible, the wars of Moses, Joshua, and all of that, it's kill women, children, and infants, men, women, and children. That was the thing. In the Quran, it says, and we are using this as a condemnation of Islam. Okay, another thing is, the Quran then says, if they cease fighting, very Allah is oft forgiven Muslim. If they cease fighting, you stop fighting. The Quran says you only fight to defend yourself, but if they stop, you stop. This verse that you are quoting, if you look at the historical context, it was revealed in the Battle of Tabuk. When the Muslims had information that the Ghassanid, we were allies to the Byzantine Empire then, the Roman empires, they were building troops around the Muslim empire, around Arabia, to invade the Muslims. And that's why they went on the war. It says fight the Christians and until they pay the jizya and they're subdued. If you also look at the historical context, that what didn't actually happen. So this also has to be understood within the laws of Islamic wars, which is fight those who fight you in the cause of Allah. do not go overboard, do not kill women, children, and all of that. So this is how you understand this. So the paying of jizya.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So
okay, go ahead. The paying of jizya. Let's take it.
I would like to talk about jizya. So when Muslims conquer non-Muslim lands, if you want to live under Muslim rule, with the Muslim protection, you have to pay jizya. And the jizya was only paid because even if you look at the context of the verse, it says until they pay jizya and feel themselves subdued, which means, and if you look at the other verse, it gives exemptions to not kill women, children, elderly. That means you're not fighting women, children, and elderly. And that also means, and this has always been the position of Islamic jurisprudence, women, children, and elderly are exempted from paying jizya. Only able fighting men pay jizya, and it's an annual payment. Muslims also pay a tax. So the thing is, there's this idea among Christians, and Orientalists push that jizya was a form of, let's say, humiliation. This was not the practice among Muslims. If you look at the lands that Muslims conquered, the reason why majority of Jews today, which we are discussing Israel, Iran, majority of Jews today are Mizrahi Jews. These are Middle Eastern Jews that lived in Arabian Peninsula for generations. Muslims helped preserve Jewish population. In Europe, they were killed. And you also acknowledge, you had the Holocaust, you had the pogroms. You never had that under Muslim rules. If Islam was a militant religion, when Muslims conquered Egypt, you're not supposed to have a single Christian in Egypt today. And if you look at how Islam spread in Egypt, it was gradual. Egypt, for a long time, under Muslim, for 400 years, was a majority Christian country, a majority Christian rule. So it's not after the Crusades that you saw a sharp decline. If you look at the UCL's, University College London, their online library under Coptic Christians, they clearly stated this. If you want, I can read it to you. I can share the reference.
All right. Okay. Let me get a comment from Dr. Adetola, and then we rush over. Right. We may not need to finish all the slides because our time is fast spent.
Our time is fast spent.
Yes.
So let me just drop this. Let me just remind our brother that post 1948, most of the Jews that have lived for centuries, not for decades, for centuries in what is predominantly now Islamic nations, across top North Africa, Middle East, have been expelled. This is a fact.
And why was that? Why did that happen?
Well, you're going to tell me.
Pre-1948, what happened? Yeah, because of 1948.
They were expelled.
You don't leave out the historical
context. Okay, they were expelled.
You paint the wrong picture. If you leave out the historical context, you paint the wrong picture. They were living in centuries under Muslim rule, peacefully. They were allowed to practice their religion. They were allowed to, their synagogues were not desecrated.
How did what happened in Israel cause them to be expelled? They were expelled. These are civilians.
Muslims were expelled from Israel.
They've lived for centuries in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Egypt, in Yemen, in Azerbaijan, in Syria. They were expelled.
So why were they not expelled before 1914?
I'm just telling you, they lived for 2,000 years in this land and they were expelled.
Why were they not expelled before 1914?
No, you can tell us. That's number one.
Yeah, I've explained to you.
Number
Maybe you have another theory. That's what I'm asking.
I prefaced what I said.
You have your own theory.
I said post 1948.
Yeah,
I said that.
It's because of 1948.
I said that at the beginning. They were expelled. That's number one. Number two, in the first 6 centuries post the resurrection of Jesus Christ, lands like Tunisia, Sudan, Algeria, Egypt, and all of these places that were 90% Christians, they didn't suddenly wake up one day and say, oh yeah, now we're going to, because we've had the Islamic message, we are converting. They were converted at the edge of the sword. And now nations that were 90% Christians and 10% animists are now 90% Islam. It wasn't because they suddenly wanted to become Islamic. Let us note that. That's what happened.
Yeah,
now, there are still about 6 million. There are still 6 million indigenous Berbers, B-E-R-B-E-R. This is why the indigenous North Africans, they're still existent, except that they are no longer in control.
Sorry, Idris, can you allow the doctor to?
Yeah, they're still around, except that they are no longer in control of their own original nation. They are the indigenous North Africans. Let's remember, this was the first set of Christians in Africa. They are still around, except that they don't know their countries anymore. They are now strangers in their own land. I just wanted us to drop that.
Okay. Can I respond quickly? So,
Please,
1290,
yeah, go ahead.
in the year 1290 in England, Jews were expelled under the King Edward I. France, multiple expulsion between 12th to 14th century. In Spain, 1492, during the Spanish Inquisition, Jews were expelled. And when most of them were expelled, they went into the Ottoman Empire and other Muslim rules. If you look at why they were expelled, they were using the Bible as a justification, which you have rejected, which we should all reject. Unequivocally, it's wrong. Because if you look at the message of Jesus, it says, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. It was a peaceful message. But people in Christian lands were using these verses to commit pogroms, massacre, and even some people that have mentioned that Hitler used, even though he didn't believe it personally, against the Jews, the Holocaust in Germany. And you had multiple expulsions of Jews in European countries. In the Spanish Inquisition, they were living under a land laws, under a Muslim empire. They expelled the Muslims and the Jews, they killed them, executed them, tens of thousands of people. So it's important that you mentioned this. But if you look at the expulsion under Muslim rule, it's not because of Islam. It's because of 1948. Muslims were expelled from Palestine, up to 1 million, close to 1 million. Some estimate 750,000 to 1 million Muslims were expelled. Up to today, they've not been able to return because of there was multiple massacres against Muslims. I'm not saying it was right, but I'm saying it's important we put it under the right historical context.
I agree.
And if we do this, another thing I want us to know is Muslims, Christians, if we can understand that Muslims, we don't hate Christians, we don't hate the Jews. If you look at verses in the Quran, it says, Ya Bani Israel, O the children of Israel, inni verily have bestowed upon you my favor, and I have chosen you among all the people over all the nations. If you look at verses about Christians in the Quran, it says the Christians are the closest to the Muslims because in love and compassion, because they are people that are very good and they practice their religion. So if you look at the message of Islam, we believe in Jesus, we believe in Mary, we believe in the prophets of the Jews. The message itself is not a message of hatred. And the reason why this is important is the issue we are discussing at hand, Israel, Iran. It's a conflict rooted in hatred. If we can address this hatred, I don't believe you hate me as a Muslim, I don't hate you as a Christian. And that's why we can have a fresh start. And then if you're going to quote the Quran, let's put it in the right context. If I'm quoting the things, the atrocities, the wars of reformation, I'm not going to say the Bible actually, Jesus preached that. I'm not going to say that. But there are people that have used it. I'm going to put in the right context. The same way if you are quoting the Quran, put it in the right context. There are people that have misused these verses. It doesn't mean Islam preaches this. There's no connection between militant Islam and Islam. So calling militant Islam is where I would also have a problem. I draw a line there. Thank you. I yield the mic.
There was just one place we didn't get to. Maybe we should just talk about it, maybe 30 seconds each. And that is how the Iran-Israeli conflict affects us in Nigeria. And I think we should just go around the table and mention that.
Sorry, Dr. Adetola. Dr. Adetola, there are 10 slides there. We've covered just 6.
I don't think we should.
I'm looking at about 2.
I don't think we should go any further.
Yes, but that issue of how it affects us in Nigeria is on the final slide and is a very important one. Yeah. But I want to thank Idris for being our guest. Thank you very much. And also Dr. Adetola. I'm going to ask for them to have a final word, both of you. So you're going to have final word. Idris will go first, and then Dr. Adetola will go last. Just think of something while I say my own idea. Idris has mentioned the fact that what is most important in the interfaith dialogue is that people don't hate each other. And I agree with that completely. I think one of the blessings of humanity is that you begin to realize that beyond the religion that people profess, these people are still human beings beneath it. In my book, Humanity, let me use the opportunity to advertise my book, Humanity. I wrote about how I wrote 2 articles on Leah Sharibu. And I talk about how at the point why she was retained and she wasn't returned with the other girls that were captured. At some point they discovered that she was the only Christian girl amongst them, this terrorist group, and they began to whip her, beat her, tell her to confess whatever they wanted her to confess, and she wouldn't. And the Muslim girls were, in fact, when I read it, I was weeping when I read it. And the Muslim girls were opposite her and they were begging her. They were begging her, say, In fact, they were reciting it while they said, just say it so you can join us, you know. And she insisted that Leah Sharibu, whenever she comes out of that place, I'm going to find out what kind of orikunkun do you have. They were begging her, they were telling her, this is it, this is how to say it, you know, and she wouldn't. You know, they were beating her, and then eventually, but where the terrorists got her was that they now packed all the Muslim girls, put them in a truck, and transported them back. And at that point, she started begging them, please release me. You know, said, no, this thing that you refuse not to confess, you're going to confess it by force. You know, so there is an underlying thing beyond religion. There's a humanity. You understand? There's a humanity between us. Idris is a human being, a lovely person. Where I work in Ibadan, I've been blessed by Muslims. Also, there was a Muslim man who influenced my employment there. You know, my colleague is a Muslim. I've said my father is a Muslim. I have an uncle in Canada who is a Muslim. You know, they are good people. So when we discuss this subject, please, by all means, I want to appeal to our listeners. The issue of hate must never come up. Another point I want to raise is the issue of education. And sincerely, when I look at Israel, what I see there is education. I don't see this. It's just people theory one way. Idris, I don't know whether you don't speak Yoruba. Sorry, people whose heads are correct. Okay, and this way I want to make an appeal, and it's to the University of Ibadan students and other students in other universities. Now I carry out missions at the University of Ibadan, and when I get there, half the time, students are praying, they are preaching, they are doing every other thing besides reading their books. Please, by all means, I want to appeal to students. When you go to the university to learn a trade, that you used to eat. Okay, here we have a young man, software developer. The guy is doing very well. Doing well in Abuja. Out of his spare time, he's reading history. He's able to come to debate. If his head is not correct, he will not be here. Okay, please, I want to appeal to our, especially Christian students that go to the university to become pastors and become fellowship leaders. Please, learn a trade. The reason is this. We are saying Israel. What Israel did or has done against the terrorist group, even America would not have been able to do it. Nigeria has been battling terrorist groups since 2009. The reason why we've not been able to conquer them is because there's something inherently wrong with the Nigerian civil service. Anything government, there's something wrong with us. Something wrong with us. It is going to be non-functional. Okay? So, and then nations get their strength from the average abilities or average education of its people. If the average education of Nigeria is, let's say, 2%, let me use that word, and then we have that of Israel, 97, and we have that of UK, 60. Israel, it doesn't matter the amount of people that there are, will be stronger than the others. Britain colonized half of the world in the 19th century because those people were intelligent. They could build ships. In fact, the way they conquered Lagos, they just brought ships one day and bombarded the whole thing and took over the whole land. Okay, so we have to get our education correct, our students. And I'm making an appeal to our young people. This is the internet age. They have artificial intelligence, they have everything. Please, stop doing Facebook. Stop watching all these 24 hours videos. Get an education. The reason I'm saying it is because I suspect there's going to be a new colonialism in the days to come. Okay? If we do not get our head correct, we're going to have a situation like in Russia, where superpowers will come to this. How long does it take to take over Abuja? And this with all this nonsense. Let me stop there. So please, I want to appeal to our young people. Please, get Israel. All they did was education. They took out Hezbollahs through their walkie-talkie, through their cell phones. Education. They could think. Idris, your final thoughts.
Okay, so what I'm going to start with, I'm going to start where I ended. So the last time, I would like us to understand that the conflict in the Middle East, one of the deep-rooted reasons is hatred and also the conflict of land. Hamas has never quoted Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-Tawbah, Surah Al-Ankabut, Surah Al-Anfal as why they are carrying out their attacks on Israel. So what I want us to understand is Muslims, and maybe I'm speaking on behalf of Muslims, we don't hold hostilities and hatreds towards Christians and towards the Jews. The Quran says, لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم. Allah does not forbid you to deal with kindness and equity, those who do not fight you in regards to your religion and those who do not drive you from your homes. Allah loves those who deal with equity, show compassion towards Jews, towards the Christians. If you look at the early century of Islam, there's a very interesting surah to Rum. As a Christian, go and look at Surah to Rum. The Romans fought the Byzantines, the Romans fought the Persians, the time of the prophets. And the Persians won during that time. The Muslims were sad that the Christians lost. Muslims were sad that Christians lost. If Muslims hated Christians, they should be happy. And the Quran says, don't worry, Muslims. After a short while, Allah will grant victory to the Romans over the Persians. Allah will grant victory to the Christians over the Persians. And the Muslims become, on that day, the Muslims will become jealous that the Christians have not won. And that's why sometimes in this conflict, we tend to choose sides based on our religious disposition without looking at the broader context, the historical context, the humanitarian context. What are the international laws and the standards of which we judge this, so that we take away our bias? Your Muslim friend, probably you have a Muslim friend, he's probably the coolest person. He helps you a lot. The Muslim, you have a Christian friend. You guys get along at work, at home. You have a Muslim that you go to the market to trade with. So it's important that we, first of all, take away this bias and then look at things in a very, very non-biased way, objective way. You look at the message of Jesus. His message was a message of peace. I do read the Bible, I understand his message was a message of peace. If Jesus was alive today, he will never support the violence that we are seeing today. And he's going to condemn it. The previous Pope, before he passed away, he said, what Israel is doing in Gaza could amount to a genocide. And he said Israel is committing terrorism in Gaza. This is a Catholic priest who is able to look beyond his own religious bias. And that's why he was one of the first, probably the only religious person that condemned the killings in Benue when the innocent people were killed. That despicable act of barbarism has no place in our country. So, and this is what I'm going to implore us. And then when we look at verses in the Quran, we should not encourage these extremists by using those verses in the way that they interpret it. Look at how has Muslims interpreted these verses historically. How have Muslims understood these verses? When Muslims conquer the land, they don't destroy the government system. And that's why you find under the Ottoman Empire, under the Mamluk Empire in Egypt, in Al-Andalus, Christians and Jews held government positions. This was in the medieval period when even Christian minorities could not live under Christian rules. If you're a Catholic and you're under Protestants, you were persecuted, killed, and exiled. Christians and Jews held government positions. And you can check the history. The Muslims don't destroy the current government political disposition there. They maintain it. They maintain the ministers. You had ministers and political office holders who were Jews and Christians under Muslim rules. They were able to work. They were able to worship in their religious places. They will govern their activities based on the Bible and based on the teaching of the Bible and the Torah. The Quran did not enforce, the Islam did not enforce Sharia on them. And these are the things that we should look at. Look at history. How did the Muslims interpret these verses? Not how Boko Haram is interpreting the verse. Every single Muslim I know, since I have been a Muslim, since birth, every single sermon I've heard, every single lecture from Muslim scholars, you can come to a mosque, we invite you, come to the mosque, come and listen to the message of Islam. Nobody is preaching these things. We don't preach hatred to Christians. We are not preaching these verses to go out and kill. There are those that have taken these verses out of context, but we should not empower them. So, and this is my message to us. I appreciate Mr. Deji, Dr. Adetola for inviting me on to this program, and I hope we'll have, let's say, other discussions where I believe discussions like this help us understand each other more. And thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Adetola, your closing thoughts.
Thank you so much. So once again, thanks for the platform and a lively discussion. Let me just round it up this way. We're having this discussion because extremists and extremism on many sides have brought us this far. 1948, like I said, the United Nations in November of 1947, to be precise, offered 2 states to the two sides. Israel accepted, the Palestinians said no, and multiple opportunities have since been offered. And don't take my word, go and look, anyone can educate themselves, go and look at the charter of the Hamas, that's the military wing of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Recently they may have changed it, I haven't looked recently, but for a long time, I'm talking of an organization that's been there for decades. Their aim was to have Israel or the Zionist movement wiped out. Hence the saying, from sea to sea and all of that. This is documented in black and white. They want Israel out of that piece of land. Now that's the truth. Now that said, I do agree with my brother that most people, humanism and all that, most people want peace, and we all should strive for that. In fact, we see what's been happening, in northeastern Nigeria, in Benue, and over again, unnecessary spillage of blood and of killing people that are made and created in the image of God. That's not what we are called for. We see our politicians every election cycle. Now, everybody has forgotten that Tinubu has a Muslim VP. Abiola had a running mate, Kinjibe, who was a Muslim. We only see this kind of nonsense every 4 years. When our politicians come around, then they remind us of this thing, and we're all up against one another. We cannot have Muslim, we cannot have Christian. It must be Muslim, as if we don't have traditionalists also in our midst. Okay? But we shouldn't allow ourselves to be so moved. People are dying, and we seem to be immune from it. But our Lord Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 10, verse 16 says, and I'm paraphrasing here, he says, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. We live in the midst of wolves. Christians, be careful. And it says, be as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves. What that means is this: we must arm ourselves with knowledge. Yes, hear from every side. Hold on to the truth. That's what we are called to do. Let's not just take narratives just because CNN. I don't know what Nigerians like about CNN and all these people who create narratives without listening. I mean, we are one of the most educated group of people on God's planet. And then we just hear from one side and we don't hear from the other side. And then we just because CNN has said it. Interestingly, nobody's listening to CNN. CNN, just go and look. They've lost about 60% of their audience, in the last year alone. Thankfully, that's a good thing because they lie and they lie. Now, where I'm going with all of this. We must inform ourselves, listen to people from both sides. Our brother said, yeah, it's true. People manipulate what the Bible, what the Quran, what the holy books have said. Read. The good thing that, just like Brother Deji said the other time, we can now read the Quran, the Bible, the Hadiths in English. And you can, all of these things are available. Just go to Google and put in Quran.com, put in Gateway Bible. You can even read the earliest editions of all these religious books in the version that they came. So all these things are now open. That's all I'm going to say. And we can find out all of these things by ourselves. So let nobody fool you. Nobody can fool anybody these days. And if you don't understand something, you can listen to commentators from both sides of the divide. And then God has given us a brain. And then you can filter what is the noise and come to a knowledge of what the truth is, or at least an approximation of what the truth is. I thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Idris, Ahmed, for being here. There's a sense that you played away and you have done very, very well. I also want to thank Dr. Adetola, and I also want to thank myself. This is Reformed Nigeria Television. We try to broadcast every week, but these days my schedule has become so tight that we can't make it out every week. But I just felt that this Iran-Israel thing, we needed to look at it. The broadcast is brought to us by Lakim Investment. They have a shortcut facility. Please, at the beginning of the program, we broadcast about them. Please patronize them and keep us in business. It's also Baptist Church. It's our local church situated at the University of Ibadan. We'll be meeting tomorrow at church. We don't reveal the location of our church. Let somebody who is not well come and break into our destiny. But if you want to know more about what we do, please send me an email at nigeriareformed@gmail.com. nigeriareformed@gmail.com. I want to request that our guests remain for me to say a good thank you, but want to say thanks to every single person who joined. We had the largest attendance of our broadcast today so far, without our Catholic brother. Our Catholic brother usually brings us a lot of audience, but on our own, this is our largest since we have been broadcasting. So I want to thank every single person who joined us. Thank you very much. And please watch out on Facebook, my social media outlets, for a possible broadcast announcement next week. Bye-bye. And by the way, before we go, Dr. Adetola has something, right? Dr. Adetola, you have something you were discussing? You wanted to do something with us? Just can you tell us a little about that?
It was supposed to be today, but since we brought this one, I have to.
Yes.
I was looking at I wanted to do a historical evolution of gospel music in Nigeria.
Yes. Historical.
Yeah,
when can you come for it?
70s,
please?
I want to look at a 50-year evolution.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
When can you come for it? Let's tie you down with a date. If possible, can you look at your schedule?
Maybe 2 weeks from now.
Okay, maybe 2 weeks from now. All right. Thank you, everyone. Dr. Adetola will be with us maybe 2 weeks from now, but we will find something for you next week. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much.